Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Noxcast, your weekly news recap podcast. I'm Nathan Hope. I'm the managing executive editor of the Equinox.
And I'm Erno, the news editor.
And we have got an action-packed recap for you this week. No announcements, so we're just going to jump right into it. The biggest news item, of course, if you've been paying attention at all to anything relating to Keene State, has been the fact that this past Tuesday, September 16th, Melinda Treadwell, the president of the college, resigned, which is not effective until October 24th. But this came as quite a shock to all of the campus community, really. The faculty, staff, and students mainly found out all at the same time as each other. And it was a piece of breaking news. We put this up online earlier, like before the paper came out. But because of the fact that it happened on Tuesday, we put together the paper on Tuesdays, so we had to do a lot of rearranging because it's not every day that the president of your college resigns. So that's got to go right up top. In the email that she sent to the campus community, she talks about how she is going to take on the presidency of the State University of New York at Geneseo, which is a also small in enrollment, around like 5,000 students, public liberal arts college in New York. So, it kind of goes along with a lot of what we've been talking about with all of the tension between legislators and higher ed in this state, and the budget cuts and the attacks on DEI. And it's just not a great time to be a president of a college in New Hampshire right now. And although the email didn't make mention of any of those challenges that we've been facing very recently, it's something to think about in terms of would you rather be president of a college in a state like New York that supports higher ed, or sort of just keep fighting the battle here till the bitter end? And it just, I don't know what to say. It's breaking news. Really just gives you that rush of adrenaline. It kind of, everything moves so fast that you just have to center yourself and focus on getting out that quick copy based on the email. We're gonna have more coverage of this in next week's paper as we gather more information. But as of right now, we know basically just about as much as the campus community knows.
Yes, and it's been crazy watching it unfold. We got the news Tuesday, and we had to change the layout then and there to make room for it. And it's just been insane seeing everyone react to it, seeing the faculty react to it. And I talked to her only 2 weeks ago. I talked to her about DEI laws, what's happening with that. Also, what's happening with the budget cuts happening here on campus. And it's sad to see her go. I think a lot of us are going to miss her. She's been a very kind and very outgoing president, especially towards news. And I am supposed to meet with her every single week as the news editor, but I'm sure that will change going forward. And I'm very upset to see her leave. I wish her the best going forward at her new school, but I think it's going to be a deep blow to Keene.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know, but there's a whole historical thing where the president who preceded President Treadwell, and Hewitt, was sort of not the most transparent in terms of news, in terms of giving out pieces of information. There was a long sort of battle between the Equinox and the administration at the time because of directed budget cuts towards us. And sort of you had to run interviews through the marketing and communications department every time, regardless of topic or story. And so when President Treadwell took over as interim president, she mentioned this to me when I used to meet with her when I was news editor, that the very first thing that she did was call the then administrative executive editor of the Equinox, Olivia, and sort of try to repair things, try to make the relationship between the administration and student media whole again. And it's just really hard to see her go, I guess, because from our perspective, she really transformed how the college handles us and all student media. It's become a lot more transparent. We seldom have issues getting information or setting up interviews with folks, and if we do, she always tries to help us out or iron things out, or any other problems aren't, they aren't related to her. It's not because of any of the rhetoric or anything that she spreads. It's unrelated, because she's been such a big advocate for the Equinox and the journalism program, and she is someone who, in my opinion, cares deeply about higher ed and the idea of liberal arts education as a whole. And she really was a fierce advocate, yeah, at a governmental level, sort of talking to legislators even when they disagreed, and even when the battle was very much uphill. She navigated the college through financial crisis, through the COVID-19 pandemic, through so many different things. And it's going to be a loss, and it's part of the uncertainty that we see in so many different areas now. Um, we have no idea who's going to take over next as interim president. We have no idea who's going to be president in the long term after that, or if the interim president will stay on as president in official capacity. We have really no clue. But I am hopeful that the next president of Keene State will carry on with President Treadwell's leadership style, with her compassion, with her just way of interacting with the community, and clearly showing that she cares at so many different levels.
I agree. She's been so great for us as a news system, and she's been very forward with us as well. And it's a deep blow to see her leave. And I wonder personally, as a news editor, like what's going to happen? Who am I going to be talking to going forward? Or will I even have an opportunity to talk to the president going forward? So it's a lot of questions at the moment.
Yeah, but like I said, just stay tuned for more coverage, and we will let everyone know the next developments in this story, because right now that's the email is pretty much all we got to at this very moment. So, but I did want to transition into what was going to be the news top story beforehand, because it's a really solid story, and we're going to throw this up on social medias as well. But it's about the environmental sustainability and studies chair, Sasha Davis. He held a book discussion about a book that he had released recently called "Replace the State," and he had just come off of a national book tour for it. But the book is sort of about what should we do when it seems like elections and protests fail. Um, it's definitely sort of related to a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about with all of the upheaval in the federal government and all of the it does seem like things are really failing and falling apart at the cracks right now. And I think the whole concept of the book is really interesting. I've never had a class with Sasha Davis, but I have interviewed him a couple of times, and he's a very articulate person. He's very, candid with how he feels about things, and I appreciate that. But this coverage from our staffer, Serena, was really strong, talking to not only him, but also those who work with him, those who had him as a professor, and really getting all the angles of the story, um, as well as the photos just being really brilliant. You kind of don't expect like a faculty book launch to have such like striking visuals, but they really were. So props to our staff photographer Amanda for that. Yeah,
I think this story is just very relevant from what we're seeing now. And I think it's very empowering that he pulled from some of his own experiences, from things that he's seen. And I think that the coverage of the event was also wonderful. Serena did a great job. There are such varying perspectives presented in the article, and the quotes that she got were also fantastic. I believe one audience member had a quote that was just hope. She said that Sasha Davis inspires hope in people, and I think that's very impactful to see from an audience member who very clearly came to see his work and see what he's doing going forward. and I think it paints a very good picture of him as a person as well.
But yeah, just really great coverage all around. I was really happy to read it and see it, and I encourage everyone to check it out. It's a really interesting story. And with that, I would like to segue into our region and state top story, which was actually one of your pieces, Chloe. It was about the lawsuit against the sort of DEI ban on the state level. It was put on a temporary hold, and there is some new developments in this, so I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, the original deadline was supposed to be September 18th. They were supposed to get a resolution on the preliminary injunction, and now it's been pushed back to October 2nd. The restraining order they got against the legislator is still in effective. It's still going to be going until October 2nd. And I talked with Jill Bisonetti today about it. It just happened yesterday as of time of recording this. And it's just new developments. It's a very ongoing story. We've been covering it for the past couple of weeks, and we keep seeing these new things happening, and we'll continue to cover it going forward and see ultimately what happens on October 2nd.
Yeah, just really keeping us on the edge of our seat with this one. But for context, the lawsuit is against the state's House Bill 2, which was the state budget law. In the law, there was an amendment that was included that prohibits public entities from engaging in practices related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the issues sort of lie within the fact that that's not exactly clearly defined as to what falls under DEI. It's not clear how it would be enforced or how really the state should go about it, how institutions should go about, complying with this ban, and of course the issues that pertain to free speech. But there's a lot of questions as to what's going to happen with this. It's going to be a major case in the state, regardless. But over the summer, because of this legislation, the Office of Student Diversity, Belonging, and Equity rebranded to the Office of Community and Belonging. Dottie Morris's title change. It used to be the Vice President of Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, I believe, Jedi, and that has now changed to Vice President of Community and Belonging. So already some pretty major changes with rebranding because of this. But again, it's sort of an instance where they don't really know what to do. They haven't really been given guidance on it. And there also is just the question fundamentally, even if it was to be laid out, this is exactly what we're talking about. Is that actually constitutional?
Yep. And I've talked to Dottie, and I've gotten her perspective on it. And I think it's very great that she's doing this as an individual, not as a representative for Keene. And she's really taking a stand against everything that's happening with DEI. And I think it's very impactful for her students to see her going out and doing this and being proactive against what is happening. And I'm very happy with what she's doing. I wish them the best on October 2nd. I hope they get the preliminary injunction, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yep, that's definitely been the theme. But transitioning into our top story in student life on a more positive note here, definitely is a profile piece about an international student from Zimbabwe, Blessing Sitole, who is a computer science and mathematics major. He has worn a lot of different hats around campus as one of the co-presidents of the Global Cultural Club. He worked with IT as an assistant. He was a community assistant. He just does all sorts of things, but he's been really prominent around campus. I'm sure that whoever you are watching, you must have seen him at some point. His presence is really hard to ignore, definitely, which is one of the quotes that we saw in the story. The chair of the math department talked about how he's not just present, he's a presence, which was really thoughtful, and an amazing thing to, say about someone. And I think it just really speaks to the heart of the story. But it was really good. This piece was done by one of our staffers, Dakota Sweet, and the accompanying photos by our staffer, Janet. So really great piece all around. And I really loved sort of getting to see more about him because we always look for those students that we know that there must be more there with their backstory. There must be what drives them, what do they want to do after college, and we always want to just highlight students.
And I think that just seeing these student profiles is very amazing. It's great to see students get highlighted and being given credit for their work. And seeing someone who I know personally, who I've seen personally, who I'm literally in a class with this semester, has also been really cool. Like seeing the face that you can recognize in the paper is always cool. And I'm very happy for him. I think he's doing a lot of great things on campus. And it's just great to see a student that you recognize and to see a fellow peer being given the credit for their work.
Yeah, it's really amazing, and I know that a lot of the times when we do these profile pieces with like international students in particular, they have times where they send the paper home to the country that they're from, and it's really sort of touching to see that importance to them, sort of in a very real way. So yeah, just really a great piece and really insightful into getting a look into the person that Blessing is. Um, this is not going to be a really good way to sort of transition between a couple of these stories. So bear with me. But the editorial that we did this week was about the impact that the assassination of Charlie Kirk has had on America as a whole and sort of political discourse. If you don't know, Charlie Kirk is a conservative activist. He was the founder of Turning Point USA, which is an organization dedicated to bringing particularly college students into the conservative movement. He hosted a podcast, but his main thing, I guess, really was going to college campuses and hosting these like Q&A slash like debate sessions where he would field questions from those who disagreed with him and have a debate openly. And so last week on Wednesday, as of filming this, he was speaking at Utah Valley University, doing one of these debate sort of discussions, and he was shot and killed by an assassin who's now in custody. And just the fallout, the immediate reaction, first of all, to all of this has just been completely different from anything else we've seen in the past. I think, in terms of what can be considered like national tragedies and sort of acts of political violence, even where we used to see sort of that the talking points about how we need to cool down temperatures and we need to return to some civility and peaceful discussion, and we need to not use violence in the political arena. And it sort of immediately was turned into which side can push their narrative harder, particularly on the right. We saw a lot of right wing outlets and we saw a lot of right wing personalities and folks in the government try to jump on the newest narrative there, which has been that transgender people must be at fault. They were trying to see first if the shooter maybe was trans, and then he wasn't, and then they said maybe his roommate was trans, and then they said maybe the music he listened to is made by trans artists, and then the list goes on. But really, anything to sort of tack onto it that they can blame the community that they seem to want to go after now. So we saw that, and we didn't see almost anybody going out and saying that we need to calm down here. I mean, it's just been an all out free for all in terms of the discourse, I think. And we sort of also touched on how the reaction to Kirk's death compared to that of the Minnesota Democratic lawmakers who were assassinated over the summer in an act of political violence. We also saw on the same day that Kirk died a school shooting in Colorado, and the reaction from the government has been completely different to those things. In Kirk's instance, flags were put at half mast, and Trump has floated giving him the Medal of Freedom posthumously, and there was a in memoriam sort of vigil held in Congress even just today as of filming. It's just really concerning, and usually we try to come up with what solution we think needs to be implemented, what you know concrete thing can we do here. But this editorial was really just about sort of what is the impact of this, and how do we think this country is gonna grapple with these sorts of things going forward.
Yeah, and I was in class when it happened. It was crazy to see this really just unfold for the first time in front of my very eyes. It was all everyone was talking about in class. My next class, it was all anyone was talking about. And it had a very noticeable impact on campus, I believe, and just across the country, as we're seeing. And I think a lot of people were very quick to make conclusions before we had the evidence, before we even had the shooter's name. There were calls for war. And who are you even warring against? We don't even know who he is. And it was just insane. It's been a media storm on both sides. And I think we've seen a lot of right wing commenters calling for things that aren't factually correct. There's been a lot of blame put on the trans community when there's very, very little factual evidence to support that at all. And we've seen people just jump to conclusions without any facts. And this is like really the first time that we've been seeing this kind of assassination with this media storm in the current age and in America. And it's just been crazy. We didn't have this before, and now you're seeing people get canceled over things that they've been saying about Charlie Kirk. Just Jimmy Kimmel got his show canceled and put off the air yesterday, and it's been a very wild ride to watch unfold before us.
It's sort of comparable to what happened in the aftermath of 9/11 in terms of the government's response to that being overbearing when it comes to civil liberties and individual freedoms in America. They sort of overreacted in terms of putting additional security measures, and it ended up becoming a thing where you're spying on American citizens, and the freedoms are being taken away in pursuit of quote unquote like finding terrorists in that instance. And then now we're sort of seeing a similar thing where, but now it's to a whole different level because you know Kirk was assassinated, and now in the fallout of that, if you're a public figure, if you're a professor at a university, and you tweet anything that isn't deemed sufficiently sad about Kirk's passing, if you're not absolutely torn up and fully just supportive of Kirk as a person, not even just condemning his death, you have to also say that he was a good person, things like that, and it's completely rooted in censorship. And we're kind of fearful now that there's going to be another one of those crackdowns, and we're already sort of seeing the ramifications of that, like you mentioned with Kimmel, but also just across the board where people are being doxxed and people are being harassed and people are losing their jobs and their careers are being ruined simply because of comments that they made, in some instances are pretty mild, about Charlie Kirk. And I think it's wrong to say that you can't say anything negative about who a person was in death. I think that's ridiculous, and it's sort of ironic in a weird way that like Charlie Kirk was someone who liked to promote the idea of free speech, and he liked to at least say that he embodied it. There can be like a discussion as to whether that's actually accurate, but he championed it when he was alive, and he made a big deal about the free exchange of ideas, and sort of the backlash of this not being able to truly voice your opinion about him. It's kind of it feels very hypocritical.
Yeah, and I think we've seen this campaign to try and force people to memorialize him basically against their will. And it's taking away freedom of speech in this country to try and force people to say good things about a man who, in life, said a lot of hateful things. And I don't think we should be forcing people on any political side of the spectrum to memorialize Kirk. They are allowed to have their own opinions on it, they're allowed to say whatever they want. And with the age of the internet, people can say a lot of things and it can go up very quickly, and a lot of others can see it. And trying to crack down on these comments being made about Kirk just isn't feasible. There are so many people who are saying things. It's all over the internet. You can't destroy freedom of speech like that in this country. And people are allowed to say what they want at the end of the day. And our government needs to acknowledge and respect that without making calls to demonize these people and to force them to stay quiet.
It's just the weaponization of it all has been so just terrible to see. Really, I mean, there's no way around it. Um, and it's a scary moment. And obviously, we of course we condemn all political violence, including Kirk's assassination. You shouldn't go about any sort of disagreeing with someone by committing violence against them. That's horrible, and there's just full stop. That's true. That's just how it is. And no one should be promoting it. And I feel like now it's a situation where it's like it feels like from the perspective of the right now, where they're sort of taking it as like, oh well, like anything that we do from now on that's political violence is like self-defense because you started it, quote unquote, or something. And sort of taking it as like a thumbs up or like an approval as to now we can do whatever we want basically because you killed our idol, which is a weird way of thinking of it, because again, we still don't really know for a fact the ideology of this person who was the shooter, why they did it, what they were thinking, and it's already just being like surmised as like, nope, this is the case. It's completely left versus right, and sort of also at the same time ignoring any political violence that's happened from the right, which we've seen quite a bit of as well. Um, I just think that there's there's a lot to be concerned about here.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched on it a bit earlier, but I feel like we saw such an outpouring for Charlie Kirk compared to Melissa Hortman and the school shooting as well that took place on the same day. And it's been like America has fixated itself on this one man. And the right, especially, has been calling for political violence over his death. And political violence is never acceptable. And the fact that they're trying to use this man's death as an excuse to hurt other people is very alarming. And we touched upon that as well. But it's just, you can't be using this senseless killing as a way to promote violence against others. It's just going to tear people apart even more so than they already are over politics. And I think we just really need empathy right now. And for people to recognize that political violence is never acceptable and that this should be a moment where we seek out empathy and peace rather than calling for up in arms over this. And it's also a good moment to acknowledge gun violence, which was a core part of this as well, and to blame the prevalence of guns in America and their usage, rather than saying that we should use those guns to hurt others because they hurt us first.
Yeah, I guess I would say I would like to end off on a somewhat positive note about it in that we're at Keene State. We're a campus that cares a lot about free speech and freedom of expression, and I'm glad that we have a college who is very supportive of peaceful demonstrations of political speech and disagreement and things like that, and that people here don't really have to fear as much of the same things that we're seeing with other colleges where folks are getting fired for saying any little thing about Kirk. I think that we're fortunate to have a campus that is as committed as Keene State is to the ideals of the Constitution, the First Amendment in particular. So there's sort of something to hit at home there with that story. But again, there's not really a good way to transition between these two here. But moving on to arts and entertainment, we had a top story done by our staffer, Emily Sloan. A lot of great staff work all around this week. But this was about the new artistic director and programming manager at the Redfern Arts Center, Stephanie Bass Abrams, who has quite an interesting background. She has a background in theater and circus, and she used to be a mime. So there's a lot of history, I guess, to draw on there in terms of what she plans to bring to the position and sort of rooted in experience just in the field is always nice to see. And with like how have left campus over the past year or so, seeing new folks is always great. And it was a really good coverage overall.
I think seeing a positive story after the last few that we covered is very nice. And seeing new faces come here to Keene is always welcome. I think her background is very interesting. Hearing about what she's done before coming to Keene is very fascinating to me. And I think it's a very unique story to tell personally. And I think it's great that we got that out there. And with the loss of Treadwell, just welcoming as many new people as possible and getting some happiness on campus after recent events, I think is very nice.
Yeah, and it was good too because this wasn't something that was on my radar personally, but Stephanie Abrams had reached out to our arts and entertainment editor Haley and said, "Just so you know, I'm new here on campus. I got hired as the artistic director and programming manager. If you would like to do a story about that," which is always appreciated when people are kind of thinking about us and trying to find a way to be more visible on campus. And we're glad to do a story about that. And it was really good in terms of getting the perspective of those who already work in the Redfern and someone who was on the hiring committee there. So I definitely recommend checking it out. Lastly, we're going to finish up here with sports. Also, a pretty positive story here. The men's soccer team is off to a very good start this year compared to last year, especially. Um, their record as of recording is 5 wins and 1 loss, and they started the season undefeated 3-0. They lost one, and then they won one again. But that number of wins is actually more than they had in all of last year. So this is a major comeback for the team, and it was sort of just nice to get an inside look into the perspective of the coach and the players and the captain about sort of what's really changed and what's sort of lit a fire under them and the motivation that they have now. We sort of also saw that when we did our fall sports preview, the teams that might have done less than ideal or less than what they had wanted last season, coming back this season and having high hopes and having that motivation regardless of what happened in the past. And this is a great example of that.
We love to see it for sure on campus. I'm very happy for them, and I'm very happy for the way it reflects back on Keene as well. And I think it's just really nice to see this positive thing at the very end of our paper after everything else that we've covered. And it was great to get coverage of these different perspectives on it and just seeing this very happy thing unfolding on campus with our sports teams. Yeah, I think it's just great.
I'd also like to think that our senior reporter Elias, who's one of the captains on the soccer team, might have played a decent part in their success so far. So shout out to him, and I'm looking forward to having him back writing after the season's over. But hopefully it's a happy end to the season as well. But yeah, that's it for the recap for this week. As always, I would like to extend a special shout out to the composer of the music for Noxcast, our very own Equinox alum, Zach Keenan, and the creator of the graphic for Noxcast, our very own art director, Elijah Fisher. And finally, the editor of Noxcast for now, our webmaster, Charlotte King. Until next time, I've been Nathan Hope.
I'm Chloe Erno.
Thanks for watching.